you ready? My apologies for being tardy, it's my fault. Thank you for joining. The mayor will speak regarding the incident on Tuesday night on Sayles Street. Then the colonel of the Providence Police will speak, and then we'll open it up for questions. Mayor Jorge, Elorza. Mayor.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. So we're here to talk about the incident that occurred a few days ago on Sayles Street. As is our policy, we have released the longest video that we have last night, and our police department is in the process of redacting several other videos, and we'll release them as soon as we have them. When the police arrived at the scene, it was a challenging situation. And what we want to do is provide the full context of what happened before, during, and after, to the extent that we have video. As I mentioned, it is an ongoing investigation. We're trying to connect all of the pieces and all of the puzzles to this. And at this point, we cannot speak to specific parts of the investigation or the incident that occurred a few days ago. But we can speak at a general level about what we saw. You know, I reviewed some of the tapes myself, and I've seen what's out there publicly, and I reviewed the video that we released yesterday. You know, what I saw with my eyes are two things. On the one hand, you see officers that arrive, who act professionally and de-escalate the situation, but you also see several instances of officers who used inappropriate language, did not de-escalate the situation, and simply do not reflect the police department that we strive to be. We're going to be releasing more videos over the coming days to make sure that we share with the public all of the information that we're seeing as part of this investigation as well. It takes us some time, it takes the police department some time to redact all of the information and all of the faces. However, we will be releasing them as soon as we have it. Again, this is going to be an open and full investigation. That's what we do. As part of a professional police department that strives to be the best urban police department in the country, what we will do is we'll do a full investigation, and any officer or anyone on the scene who acted inappropriate, who was unprofessional, or did not comply with our stated goal of de-escalating situations is going to be held accountable. However, we want to make sure that we're doing all of this, understanding the full context of what happened, and doing a full investigation as we proceed. We want this to be as transparent as possible, and so as I mentioned, we're going to be releasing all the videotapes that we have as soon as we can feasibly put them out. So I will pause there, and I'll pass it over to the Chief, who will provide more context to the incident. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. So as always, the Providence Police Department is committed to transparency in an open forum. We'll conduct a comprehensive review of this situation. But as you can see, this event on Tuesday night lasted about 3 hours in total. The Providence Police, from their time of arrival, were called to the scene, and right up till the end of that 3 hours, there were several attempts during the course of that time to de-escalate, to defuse, and we spent a lot of time there. At one point, every patrol car and unmarked unit that was free was at the scene. They were called to the scene. So I'll try as best I can to run through a timeline. I wasn't going to do this, but I think to put it in its true context, I will as quick as I can. So at 6:06 p.m., there's a call, complainant calls and says, the police need to get to Sayles Street, it's out of control. 1 minute later, there's another call, and then there's a third call. And the second call is about a woman who claims a large group of people are trying to engage her 7-year-old daughter into a physical altercation. One car is dispatched to the scene. So prior to that, the hydrants were open. It was a very hot, humid night. Tensions were high. There were some disputes ongoing between two houses on Sayles Street, 260 and 264. They had already been in verbal disagreement, and then at some point, someone had threatened a 7-year-old child, and some adults got involved in that threat, and the parents and adults of that child got involved. That's what the initial responding officer has been dealing with. He responds to the scene and does a very good job alone. There's approximately 50 people in the surrounding area. He comes over channel 4 and immediately calls for the Providence Water Supply and Providence Fire Department to shut off the hydrant, and he diffuses and calms down the situation as best he can. That's at about 6:30, 6:40 p.m. At about 7 o'clock, Sergeant Paola informs dispatch that cars are clearing and because other cars have responded, the situation is in hand. So 1 hour later, the situation appeared to be in hand. Just 2 districts of patrol cars on the scene. About a half hour later, we're called again to respond to 264 Sayles, and at that point, the sergeant responds as well, and he says we may need more cars to the scene. One of the officers who responds on the scene comes over the radio and indicates there are several people fighting in the street, of which he attempts to break up those fights and move people back to their respective houses and separate them because they were angry. There was a lot of agitation, there was a lot of tension between the two houses. You can see on the videos we put out so far, there were several attempts to get them back to their respective houses. At such point, there was one of the females from one of the houses walked in the middle of the street and walked towards the other house and threw a bottle to incite that group. And then that enraged a younger female from 264, I believe, who was upset because her mother was jumped. The first group had called in several other people and they jumped her mother. And she was hearing that story just around the same time that this woman from that other house came in the middle of the street, threw a bottle up in the air and smashed the bottle. That young female ran to that house. Officers quickly, and you may have seen this in the video, responded over there just to defuse that situation. They grabbed her. That was going to be a bad situation. They grabbed her. She was placed under arrest. That's why she ran towards that house, because her mother had been jumped and then the family had incited by throwing a bottle. Captain responds to the scene. At some point, we moved in to make a couple more arrests. Someone's emergency button went off, and the dispatcher at 8 o'clock hits the tone, every car in the city to respond. So 2 hours later, every car in the city is responding to the scene. One of the officers you may have seen lost his body on camera, and then while there were several officers on scene, he moved over to retrieve his body on camera, and someone was standing on top of his body on camera. He pushed that person to retrieve his body on camera, got his camera back. Again, there's several attempts for each group to get at each other, both verbally. There may have been some communication by social media. We'll meet you in the backyard to fight, which our officers had learned of. So we had quite a bit going on in a chaotic scene with fights, or at least verbal disputes going back and forth to incite fights, and also one in the backyard. We ended up making 5 arrests on scene. There were 2 juveniles, males, 2 juvenile females, 1 adult. There were 3 separate calls from citizens for police to respond and documented. The fire department responded at 8:30 to assist, and we had kind of cleared the scene. There was only 1 car on scene, and again, the fire department had called dispatch for further assistance from the police department. So we had to respond back there, and it took us another half hour to restore order. So in total, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., we finally cleared the call at 8:58 p.m. Pepper spray was used during that incident, and it was used according to policy. When verbal direction, hands-on technique, control posed by officers have failed or elected to fail, it's authorized to use OC. When the officer could reasonably use an impact weapon as a striking tool, it's authorized to use. When OC would be an effective, safe, and quick form to de-escalate resistance. What happens oftentimes is when we move in to make an arrest, we try to extract an individual from the group, and then the crowd may encroach and try to interfere in that arrest. We've seen that often, like, we're a busy police department. Just last week, we had a situation like that occur, and a female officer ends up with a broken nose and a broken ball socket. We have to, as best we can, try to create distance and keep, for the safety of everyone, the people on the scene and the police officers, and that's why OC was used. I just figured I'd put that out there. You saw it on the video. OC was clearly used, and within policy, to create distance and prevent them from encroaching when there's an arrest to be made. Those are, that's the timeline, those are the facts. And we'll stand for questions. Commissioner, I don't know if you had.
Well, the first complaint that we got was at 5:45. Everybody was having a good time. And the people from the house to sister were telling everybody in the neighborhood that they own that pump, that everybody's supposed to get out of the neighborhood. And everybody said something going to happen, and they started dispersing and going to the house, and then the fight started with the house on 264.
We didn't get the first call until, so you said
5:45. Yeah, that was when everybody started
so
leaving the house.
we did when we first get on the scene, we learned this dispute had been ongoing
Yes.
for quite some time. And we don't get the first call until 6:06, dispatch call.
So Jorge, do you stand by that appropriate force was used? The basic claim is that in that brief, apart from what led up to it, and I know you're claiming that it has to do with it, but I think the specific claim is that in that short couple of minutes that is seen on the Facebook video, that police officers, when they came across the street, used excessive force, didn't have to hit some of the people, didn't have to use the spray. Do you stand by what happened and the force that was used?
So we're continuing to review. We've not seen all the video. There's probably 24 police officers with video. So that's a part of our total review of this situation. So I can't say at this point we came to a conclusion about any either use of force or behavior until it's complete. Such time, then we will make an opinion based on our investigation and corroborating evidence to determine all those factors.
In that moment, what was the reason? I know that you can see there was the one person who went out in the street and looked to be, again, agitating the other people on the other side. But what was the reason that all of a sudden then the officers came across the street and then used that force and then detained multiple people in that chaotic scene? Was there something other than a verbal thing that was said? And again, was that appropriate?
I believe that individual was the agitator and was involved in a physical confrontation. And so the officers knew that he committed a crime of an assault and wasn't able to get him. I believe he originally was in our hands, and then he was able to free himself and run behind. And they knew that he committed a crime and they were going to arrest him. And I believe he continued to agitate. And that's when they moved to grab him away from the crowd onto the sidewalk where that video was posted.
What's your reaction to the officer who says after pepper spray is deployed, who wants some more?
Look, that's not language that we accept. We shouldn't be talking that way. And when we complete all this, review, there'll be responsibility and accountability for that. That's not what we're about.
Commissioner?
Understanding that in the heat of the moment, there's no excuse to use that kind of language and other language that we've heard so far. But we need to complete everything and then hold officers at times.
There was also an officer in the Jamal Gonzalez incident who faced discipline for the way he treated a bystander. Are you concerned that this sort of behavior is a pattern that we've seen now multiple times in these high-profile incidents?
No, I wouldn't say it's a pattern, but I think police officers are human beings and they lose their temper, but we're trained to not lose our temper, and we're trained to de-escalate. So I don't think it's a pattern, but when it comes up, we address it.
Commissioner, the Black Lives Matter PAC said that 20 children were brutally beaten. Are you going to be looking at those who weren't arrested? What's your response to that number? What's your response to the Black Lives Matter statement?
It's inaccurate.
Commissioner,
Can you touch on
two
the
police
House?
officers were suffering from self-inflicted pepper spray, and there was many children who were under the age of 5 and under, who were also hit by pepper spray. It seems that pepper spray is used rather indiscriminately. I've seen this before during some of the Black Lives Matter protests last year, where officers would spray and then run through their own cloud of spray and knock themselves out of commission. Is pepper spray really the kind of thing to be used when there are tiny children nearby, or the situation is that chaotic that anybody could be hit in the vicinity?
So we always attempt to de-escalate, and whenever a 5-year-old or a child is sprayed, one of our officers, gets sprayed all the time. It depends on the wind, but it's a tool that we've used for decades in policing, and it's a tool that doesn't. It's a tool that we don't have to escalate further, using a taser and beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an effective tool. People don't like their eyes being stung by spray, and most people will then leave the area. That was their attempt, and unfortunately, young children caught some of that. We have no evidence that spray was used directly at a child.
And about the woman who was severely affected and went to the hospital because she had asthma. And that area is known for having some of the highest asthma rates in the state. And yet using pepper spray there would seem to put people at risk of even death.
Understood. We don't know who has asthma.
I know.
As we deploy spray, we offer relief as much as we can. I think she was transported to the hospital for medical aid. Unfortunately, and I'm not just, it's a tool that's really effective.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't determine who has, and so we don't go right to spray. We give verbal commands to disperse. I think you saw a little bit of that with police officers asking, demanding that they go back into their house and leave the area. And when we went to arrest and we needed to segregate that person, and then there was people that was encroaching, that's our only tool to keep them back, and it is effective. Unfortunately, there are ramifications.
Yeah, Commissioner, can you touch on the house, the number of times law enforcement has been called there? There's also one part of the video where the individuals in that house are then even threatening to shoot the people next door. Just what is that accurate, the 42 times that police have been called out there?
We've been called to those houses dozens of times. I know the Colonel mentioned last night 42 times, so over 18 months or so, but we've been there often.
For what sort of incidents?
Very similar, nuisance, disputes, things of that nature. Loud music is one in which we go there constantly. I don't know of each of the instances in which we went and how many times, if ever, we arrested.
Has anything like this happened there in any of those other dozens of times, escalated to this point?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to this degree. There's been several disturbances there. I think in the complement of 42, several were disturbances, but not to this degree.
Chief, how concerning is it that when you have, again, this probably goes to this question too, the complete turnout of the police force to an isolated incident as pertains to public safety with the rest of the city? How often has the entire force been called, as you said, that dispatch calling all available cars, and where does that put public safety in terms of the rest of the city?
It's a risk to the rest of the city, and we've seen it oftentimes at nightclubs where the entire city, and that became a big contention for the city council with the downtown nightlife district, where every car in the city would be drawn to a nightclub and they would lose police coverage in their neighborhoods. So it doesn't happen every single day, but over the course of a year, over the course of our careers, it's happened. And when the alert tone goes off and every car in the city goes, that's an emergency call. And to answer your question, is it a risk to the rest of the city? It is, because there's no coverage.
And how many officers total were deployed to that area?
I do not have that total number, but patrol, we probably had about 35 plus who were on scene. So everyone who was not engaged in a call or in the station on another incident, they report or an incident. So mid-20s, maybe 30.
At this point, are the
And then plainclothes officers too.
At this point, are the Attorney General's office or the state police involved in any investigation? And if it is determined that, excessive force is used, or, in that case, would the Attorney General's office be triggered into being part of the investigation?
Yeah, I talked to the Attorney General yesterday a few times, and we have not, or he has not invoked that policy when we do a use of force, but we've been in communication.
There are some groups who have seized on this to suggest that the police should be defunded. What do you or the mayor or anyone say about this?
So, we hear that, we've heard that over the past year and a half. I don't know what that means. Abolishing the police is not an option in this country. And I know there's frustration with the police's responsibility over the decades of responding to calls, and some of those folks want that diversion to people that may be better equipped and handle mental health calls. So we're in the process of building that. But in this instance, police are called because there's a public safety issue by the community in which we respond.
One of the officers,
I can follow on that, Mayor. You've spoken at length about really rechanneling funds from the police to other purposes. What do you make of this call to defund the police based on this?
Yeah, and this situation I don't believe is one where those diversion services would have been helpful. It was a tense scene. As you heard, we received various or several calls to the area, and the police have to respond to defuse it. I don't believe that this is an incident where the diversion services where we are investing would have made a difference. With that said, I think we all acknowledge that not only is there a need for more mental health services, but the need is increasing every single year. We do not have enough as a city and as a state in terms of resources to meet that demand, and we need to invest more to make sure that we meet the growing demand in the future years. And so those are all investments that not only are we actively making, but we are very interested in increasing over the coming years. Now, however, there are some situations where even those kinds of investments, they wouldn't make a difference, and I believe that this is one of those instances where we would not have deployed mental health services. In this case, I don't think it would have mattered.
Mayor, there are derogatory comments made by several people, by several officers, right? They're all animals. Is there someone who's civilized here? They misgendered a queer black woman, for instance, and then said some pretty horrific things about her as well. And also said those things before the arrest occurred, as if he was targeting her specifically for being in the LGBT community. What do you say to that? What does that say about the professionalism? What does that say about the respect the police have for the very community they're supposed to be serving?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Steve. So I can't speak about specific words or about specific officers, but I've watched the same videos, and there's some stuff that I've seen and that I heard in those videos that fall way short of the professionalism and the standards that we set for ourselves. There are comments that instead of de-escalating a situation, which is our policy, actually escalates the situation. And there are some comments that I saw that are unacceptable in any context, but specifically for a police department that seeks to continually improve and have the high standards that we have. And so, while I can't speak to any particular, I mean, we're all seeing and watching the exact same videos, and absolutely, there was some inappropriate language, there were some inappropriate things that we all saw. And as part of our review, we're going to address it and make sure we hold people accountable.
And following up on that, do you think that we're still committed to reforming rather than repealing Leober? Because, of course, that's one of the reasons you can't speak specifically to this incident, and it's one of the reasons we can't, you're unable to specifically say this officer's words were incorrect or terrible or worthy of punishment of some sort.
That's right. And as I've said before, I fully support completely repealing Leober, because let's remember what Leober does. Leober is really not about police officers. Leober is about police chiefs, and it limits police chiefs' ability to discipline their own members. We don't place that limitation on directors of any other departments, not superintendents, not DPW directors. It's only on police chiefs. I believe that we should allow police chiefs to manage and run their own departments, and that's why I believe that Leober should be reviewed.
All right, guys, we're going to do 2 more questions, guys.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner, could you actually respond to the claim that there were several
No problem.
people who were kept in the back of a hot van, perhaps without AC? One of them might have had asthma. It sounds like a lot of them may have been pepper sprayed. Have you been able to verify whether that is indeed the case?
That's a part of our review. There were people that were put in the back of a van. The back of the van does not have air conditioning, but at this point I can say with certainty it was 30 minutes or less that they were held there and then transported, but I don't have the specifics about whether or not somebody was suffering from any effect, either medical effect or effect from pepper spray, and whether or not our officers knew or should have known and didn't provide relief or help for those.
May we ask Mr. Mayor a question?
All right, this is the last one, guys.
Mayor Elorza,
Brian?
just
Brian?
John, go ahead, I'll let him.
Mayor, you talk about accountability with the police, but what about some of the activists yesterday that were blatantly lying, saying that children were beaten, babies were pepper sprayed, trying to incite a race war? When you watch that video, none of those kids listen. There's no respect for police. What about accountability within the community?
So, our job is to be as transparent as we can possibly be throughout the process, and that's where the value of these videos, the police-worn body cameras, comes in. We want to provide the full context of what happened and let the public reach their own conclusion, just as we are going to be reaching our conclusion. And by being fully transparent, we believe that there is just more respect and also integrity to the entire process. So that's why we're committed to transparency, and we'll let the public reach their own conclusions.
All right, we're going to let Brian go, and then you guys can follow up after, okay?
In what we see on the videos, in incidents like this that are caught on video, is that a typical response to how things like this are handled? And is it just because in this day and age of everybody having a camera and posting it to social media that now everybody's seeing it, and that's what sparks the outrage? And is it causing you guys to be more accountable for things that maybe would have not been seen before?
Yes, I think body cams on police officers across the country are good in a lot of ways. Good for accountability, good for the public to see and hold police officers accountable. So yes, I think it's a great thing. This police department nearly 5 years ago unilaterally and independently went to body cams. We saw the value to it, and I applaud the men and women because it's hard, right? Having a camera on your shoulder every time you respond to a situation, it's hard. I didn't have it when I was a young officer. And so it changed the dynamic of policing in a good way. And unfortunately, the public then sees what police officers are up against and decisions that have to be made. They're human beings, and sometimes decisions, when you look at the video two weeks or 2 hours later and sit and critique, it's like anything else. It's easy to critique when you're not in that element, but the beauty is, here's our policy, here's our standards, here's how you should behave and act. And we're a better police department because of it, and we're going to continue to improve.
All right, thank
How
you.
long
Thank
is
you
it
all.
gonna take to review the remainder of the body cam?
Yeah, I mean, it's a priority. As I know you're all frustrated that we didn't push it out sooner, but we gotta get it right. And as we finish redacting, we're gonna continue to post them.
Do you know how many more videos you have?
There were 25 officers, so there's 25 videos. If I say today and it doesn't go tomorrow, then I frustrate you. So it's a priority, we'll get it done.
We'll be in touch with you guys on all this. Thank you.